Hi, this is Jim from Safety Wars. Before we start the program, I want to make sure everyone understands that we often talk about OSHA and EPA citations, along with some other regulatory actions from other agencies, legal cases, and criminal activity. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Proposed fines are exactly that, and they are often litigated, reduced, or vacated. We use available public records, news accounts, and press releases. We cannot warranty or guarantee the details of any of the stories we share, since we are not directly involved with these stories. At least not most of the time. Enjoy the show.
This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
And from the border of liberty and prosperity. Yeah, we're back in our home studio tonight. The border of liberty and prosperity. In the highway to the north, this is Safety Wars for Thursday, June 25th, 2026. How's everybody doing out there? We're doing fine. We're doing fine. A lot going on. Congratulations to the Felix Festa Middle School for graduating today. We went to our son's graduation, so I'm here at home. And not on the road. Thank God that you got it done early in the morning. It was over at Boulder Stadium here, and also known as Clover Stadium here in Pomona, New York. And so I was like, man, they got to be making something on this. Why aren't they just doing like 50-50s, charging for parking and everything else? We get inside. Of course, the concession stands are all open for the graduation, and also, well, I'll correct myself. That is not a graduation; it's a moving up ceremony. But anyway, that's my day here. A lot of graduations this year out there in the community, and we got to celebrate that. Let's remember that 100 years ago, the 8th grade was like the highest level of education that people received. I know my grandmother from Poland, 4th grade. My German part of the family all graduated their former high school there, but no, it is what it is. But what was amazing is my grandmother was 4th grade. Right? How is my grandmother? If you've ever seen the Beverly Hillbillies, that was my grandmother, Granny. In a lot of ways, and she was a combination of that, and if you remember the old yogurt commercials, Fage yogurt, right, where you had the Greek, the stereotypical Greek grandmother, right, or maybe Italian grandmother, and she insults everybody out there. No, you dress like a prostitute. Oh, you men? You don't work? Right? That was my grandmother. And Shanette and Granny from the Beverly Hillbillies. So it was an interesting combination to grow up with. But anyway, now we go out there and, it's hot and it's messy and, it's just all of that. But thank God they got it done early in the morning. And, that's basically the way it is. So, I know, I meander sometimes. I do meander. Been a couple of days. So for whatever reason, people must be on vacation or something. The Department of Labor not issuing a lot of press releases here. But we're going to go over what they did issue this week. And it all has to do with, and let me do share screen here. And we had Supreme Court news today. We'll talk about that. Federal court enters consent order requiring 3 Maine sports bars to pay $51,000 in back wages to 47 employees. Federal court has entered a consent order requiring 3 sports bars to pay $51,000 plus in back wages to 47 employees and $31,436 in civil monetary penalties, resolving the U.S. Department of Labor's case alleging the employee violated federal wage and child labor law. Entered on June 4th in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maine, the consent judgment and order resolved the department's case alleging that 3 sports bars, right, and owned by one company, and I do know this company here, violated minimum wage, overtime, and child labor provisions. The judgment comes after the department alleged that the establishments failed to pay some employees for all hours worked or provide proper overtime compensation, altered time cards and sealed hours worked, did not combine hours worked for all locations, and right? So if you're working for the same company, 3 different locations, you got to combine things. And miscategorized some employees as exempt from overtime pay. At one location, the employer was also found to have violated hours requirements for 2 minor employees. Employers are required by law to pay non-exempt employees for all hours worked. Remember, if you have a teenager or younger working out there in the workforce, you got to know this stuff, including time and a half pay for all hours worked over 40 in a work week. Employers' willful failure, right? And what they said, employers' willful failure to fulfill the obligations will have costly consequences, according to the director, Steve McKinney. And they have a compliance assistance phone number there also. I don't give out phone numbers because, someone did that in New Jersey a number of years ago, and they gave out the wrong number. It was from a state website, and guess what happened? Somebody got the phone call starting at 2:30 in the morning, right? For days on end until they made the correction. Office of Workers' Compensation Programs seek public input on occupational hearing loss evaluation methods. Sounds obscure, but let's remember, industrial hygiene is probably one of the most overlooked areas of occupational safety and health. They estimate that industrial hygiene issues lead to somewhere around 55,000 deaths a year. That's from the OSHA website, guys. And a request for information, the OWCP is asking for input from audiologists, otolaryngologists, medical professionals, medical associations, employees, employers, insurance carriers, and other parties on the reliability and validity of audio programs compared with other objective tests, including auditory brain stem response, auditory steady state response, acoustical emissions, and others. The agency is also soliciting comments on the current standards for administering these tests and the criteria used to evaluate hearing impairment. So check it out on the website and the OSHA press releases. They have all different other stuff, but basically they want written comments by October 22nd of this year. U.S. Department of Labor recovers $1.7 million in back wages for 1,666 hourly employees denied overtime by multi-trade contractor. Oh, I got to hear this one. The U.S. Department of Labor has recovered $1.73 million in back wage plus and back wages for 1,666 workers. There's that 666, right? After an investigation found a multi-trade contractor failed to pay them for their full wages in violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Investigators with the department's Wage and Hour Division discovered that the State Group Industrial USA Limited Incorporated violated, I'm just reading it again, I'm just reading a press release, violated the FLSA's overtime provisions when it did not include incentive bonuses in the regular rate of pay for 1,666 employees working at the Ford Motor Company's electric vehicle and battery manufacturing campus in Stanton, Tennessee. As a result, the employees were not paid the full overtime premium required for all hours worked over 40 in a work week. The state group violated federal law when it excluded bonuses from its overtime calculations, averaging more than $1,000 in back wages owed to each employee. Our investigations remain committed to obtaining appropriate remedies for workers who are not paid. So you got to pay. This and helps the little guy. That's what what that does. Unemployment insurance weekly claims reports. Now, I point this out every week here. Right? Now it's not blurry. So here we have the seasonally adjusted claim. Oh, look at this. It's all about the same. All about the same. So when they scream and yell about, unemployment this and unemployment that, realize it's all level, right? So initial claims always seem to be in the last year somewhere around just a little under 200,000 to over 310,000, right? And that doesn't really vary there. Non-seasonally adjusted uninsured unemployment, again, right around 2 million. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. So in other words, what's my point? Or one of our themes here at Safety Wars is what? You are being manipulated. And by the way, you're going to get more and more manipulated as we go along here. We get closer and closer to the 2026 election. So, a game of manipulation again and again and again and again. Let's go on over. I tell you what, let's go head on over to FSN Radio News. Right now we're about 12 minutes after the hour. I know Jay Allen has better timing than me, but let's talk about this.
Safety Wars is streaming now. SafetyFM.com.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann. The United States is deploying search and rescue teams to Venezuela after back-to-back earthquakes killed at least 188 people and injured more than 1,500 on Wednesday night, with the U.S. Geological Survey warning the final death toll could be far higher. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed the deployment after speaking directly with Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, saying that collapsed buildings are the most immediate concern and that military assets will be used to get aid in because Caracas Airport has been badly damaged. The earthquake struck about 100 miles or 160 kilometers west of Caracas, with the second and larger quake measuring magnitude 7.5. Alistair D'Souza reports from Washington.
Help from the U.S. has been fast after friendlier ties between the U.S. and Venezuela. Remember, the U.S. military toppled longtime Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro earlier this year. Since then, we've seen this diplomatic realignment between Washington and Caracas, with Venezuela's interim leader Delcy Rodriguez at the helm. Meanwhile, many ordinary Venezuelans thanking the U.S. for this help coming through, but calling for the United States to put pressure on the Venezuelan government to remove restrictions on communications, for example, on social media, which they say will be crucial really in these rescue efforts.
Matthew Blackett, an associate professor of natural hazards and earthquakes at Coventry University, says rescuers may only have a day or two to reach survivors trapped in collapsed buildings.
Caracas is a very densely populated city with many buildings that were built back during Caracas' kind of heyday in the 60s, 70s and 80s. Those buildings have been lacked maintenance because of the economic crisis over the last couple of decades. So I fear that we're just skimming the surface as to some of the damage that we're seeing.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has warned that allowing any country to impose fees on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz could create chaos across global shipping lanes as tensions over the key waterway escalate. The warning came during a visit to Bahrain, where Mr. Rubio met with Saudi Arabia's foreign minister to discuss the conflict with Iran. Oman's top diplomat has separately declared that no transit fees will be imposed in the strait, though Tehran has pushed back against any alternative shipping arrangements. And the United Nations says a new cholera outbreak in Sudan is worsening, with drone strikes forcing the closure of medical facilities and water stations. The outbreak was officially declared last Tuesday, barely 3 months after the previous epidemic. Naba Mohideen reports from Port Sudan.
Local authorities in Al Ubaid and in Kordofan generally, they declared more than 734 suspected infections of cholera with more than 105 related deaths since mid-May.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more detail today at the imminent coronation of Andy Burnham, the now former Mayor of Greater Manchester, as Britain's next Prime Minister. After winning election to Parliament last week, he could succeed Sir Keir Starmer in number 10 Downing Street within a month. Mr Starmer resigned earlier this week following devastating local election results for his governing Labour Party. While Mr Burnham has served in governments before, his policy plans remain opaque, but Labour lawmakers are clinging to him like driftwood, hoping he will turn their fortunes around. Robert Shrimsley, executive editor of the Financial Times, says he's concerned that Mr Burnham may be ready to fight old political battles, but not new ones.
I mean, I think he's shown a fair degree of ambition and determination, and those are the two big things you need to get to be Prime Minister. But I think there's an awful lot of big strategic thinking which has to be done. And when you look at the challenges facing the country, particularly around the next industrial, the technological revolution, these are things that are coming at us fast now. And Andy Burnham's talking about reindustrialisation and the partial nationalisation of utilities and rolling back the worst aspects of Thatcherism, perfectly legitimate things to talk about. But there is a sort of nostalgic aspect to this. You know, the Labour Party trying to go back and fight old battles when a lot of the country needs the government to be looking ahead to the next battles.
Sir Keir Starmer has now met with Mr Burnham and agreed to provide support for a smooth transition that should be complete by the latter stages of July. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
Here's a recap of our top stories. The United States is deploying search and rescue teams to Venezuela after back-to-back earthquakes killed at least 188 people and injured more than 1,500 on Wednesday night. The US is warning that allowing any country to impose fees on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz could create chaos across global shipping lanes. And the UN says a new cholera outbreak in Sudan is worsening. That's the latest feature story news. I'm Mitch McCann in New York.
Okay, thank you, Mitch McCann. Now, I was going to talk about EPA news, and we will, but this actually, I think everybody here knows, who's been following this show for years. And again, look at my, right, what's my garb? If you're on the camera, I have the Safety Wars baseball jersey, right? Why do I wear these? Because they actually fit and they look halfway decent. You can see Safety Wars on the camera when I have this camera adjusted correctly like I do now. All right. So this actually happened up in Cooperstown. I'm not sure which right. So the hashtag that I've been following, my family's been following, right? Right, breaking story. And this is from a post on Facebook, right? And it's from, I'm not going to mention her name. So I just like to clear up a few things about the protest in Cooperstown. Now, Cooperstown, just to let everybody know, is not only, we know, home of the Baseball Hall of Fame, but there are also two sports parks there where teams raise a lot of money. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of money. There was a controversy a couple years back with Alyssa Milano raising money for her kid's team. We missed her by a week. And I mean, it's well into the five figures. No, we'll leave it at that much. And it's getting more. So everybody, these kids that are 12 years old, raise money to go there, and it's like a week sleepaway camp for the kids. Parents are there also on a little vacation. A lot of fun. Big tournament, about 104 teams, something like that. And they had extreme rain this week. And the facility that was up there, I'm not saying which one, had canceled a lot of games here, right, for this week, and there were people stuck indoors, that sort of thing. So there were protests and everything else. You could Google protests at Cooperstown, blah, blah, blah. And the hashtag that everyone's using is Cooperstown riots. I'd like to just clear up, and this is from the post I'm reading here, a few things about the protests in Cooperstown. These boys were being kids. They had been stuck indoors for hours because of rain delays, then learned that the team's outside the top 32. So in other words, only the top 32 teams wouldn't have would be the only ones playing to compete for the championship. They were disappointed, but they were also having fun and making the best of the situation. We played our guaranteed 6 games and are fortunate to get 2 more. Could a team ranked 33 to 104 had made a run? We'll never know. That's sports. But I do know that these boys are not losers. They're hardworking kids who spent a week making memories, playing baseball, and representing their families and teams. I mean, teams come from all over the country, all over the world to play here, right? The comments suggesting they're a product of gentle parenting or somehow tied to politics are completely unnecessary. Let's stop acting like a group of kids having fun is the same thing as a riot. Nobody was destroying property. Nobody was hurting anyone. There were kids being kids after a long emotional week. At the end of the day, Cooperstown was about baseball, friendships, and memories they'll carry for the rest of their lives. That's what should be remembered. Okay. Right? And let's click on Cooperstown memories. Right? And after the overnight riots following yesterday's rainout, this is another thing, which left teams seeded lower than 32 unable to compete for the championship, the tournament finally shifted into bracket play. The gamers enter and blah, 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 and it goes on here. All right. And, all different stories here with this. Let me Google this, Cooperstown riots. And this is just prior to game time here. Let's here. So this is from 2 days ago. I'm not going to mention the name of this. This is off of a post on X. This happened at blah 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 in New York. Right, hundreds of kids and players shouting, "Let us play!" were protesting because their tournament games and experience was canceled. Get this, they don't offer refunds for games that cannot be played. So you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars here. So we have 104 minus 32. So we have what? 70 teams? 74 teams? So 104, that means 72 teams here. And that's close to $1 million probably collected from 70 teams over that, not allowed to play because of weather. Oh, well, that's just the breaks, kids. I don't think so, right? Cooperstown, blah, 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 prides itself on getting all the games played, and they do brag about playing rain or shine. In their opening speech, they say we'll play rain and shine even if games are in the wee hours in the morning. Yes, that happened to us. We had games at like 2 o'clock in the morning. There are countless stories of teams playing in the rain in the morning, right? 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning. There are usually 100 teams or more from around the country and sometimes internationally. That's true. Each player and coach pays and a lot of money. We'll leave it at that. We paid more than what they're mentioning here for the overall tournament package, which includes accommodations, meals, gear, and the tournament itself. Of course, travel expenses are not included. They cannot postpone the games because each week throughout the summer, a new tournament starts. So there's a weekly tournament. You get there on Sunday, play till, or Monday, and you pay to Sunday. The tournament usually takes in $2.5 to $3 million in gross revenue per tournament, but former players, coaches, and parents will tell you it has nothing to do with winning, but it's about the experience of playing there. It's a special place to play and experience baseball. That is true. Sounds like they had dropped the ball on this one. I'll say let the kids play or refund them a prorated amount. Worried about weather or injuries? Have parents say sign a waiver. Guess what? That's not going to cover you. All right, signing waivers has very limited value. What will you do if you paid all that money to play? Right? I know some will say they wouldn't pay that money and your kid's tournament was canceled. What can you do if it's stipulated that there are no refunds? They have video of the riot, the quote-unquote riot. Again, this, why are we ranking this? Well, because we're like worried about being the first sometimes. And I think we're the first international broadcast to talk about this. So, again, local story here. I do have some experience with Cooperstown. I don't know what to say here. Let's go back to EPA news. Yeah, got to EPA news. This is about safety wars. Well, this is a little bit about safety. Now, they don't want the kids to play in the rain and get hurt with that. All right, this is from the EPA today. EPA obtains over $450 million in penalties and relief in agreement with Chemours to settle claims over PFAS pollution in 3 states. The company will better control its pollution and reduce water contamination, install pollution controls, and supply safe drinking water to affected communities in 3 states. Today, U.S. EPA, the U.S. Department of Justice, and the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection announced the first comprehensive federal law settlement with major PFAS manufacturer Chemours. EPA alleges that Chemours released PFAS into the Cape Fear River in North Carolina, the Delaware River in New Jersey, and the Ohio River in West Virginia, in some cases without required permits, and in other cases in violation of those permits. Under this landmark $450 million settlement, Chemours will spend $337 million on injunctive relief, including an estimated $280 million to provide alternative drinking water, $60 million to ensure compliance with the law at its West Virginia facility, and additional funds to ensure compliance at its other facilities. Additionally, Chemours will conduct projects under a multi-year government-supervised $90 million mitigation program. The company violated requirements under federal and state clean water, toxic substance, and hazardous waste laws. PFAS, short for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, I'm getting good at pronouncing that, are a group of man-made chemicals used to make products resistant to water, grease, and stains. They do not break down easily in the environment or in the human body, and they have been linked to serious health risks. The settlement will resolve the company's liability under the Clean Water Act, the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, Toxic Substances Control Act, and the West Virginia Water Pollution Control Act. The action further advances the EPA polluter pays commitment, holding accountable those who have significantly contributed to the release of these forever chemicals. And it goes on and on. Under settlement, Chemours will bring its facilities back into compliance with the law. Hold on one second. My allergies are killing me here. Complete 14 treatment system projects to reduce PFAS and wastewater, stormwater, and groundwater at its West Virginia facility. Control releases of Gen X, a type of PFAS, from each facility at an efficiency of at least 99%. Test drinking water and provide treated or alternative water to communities nearest plants in West Virginia and New Jersey. Implement control at its North Carolina facility based on recommendations from an independent engineering firm. Start enhanced leak detection programs, and conduct engineering reviews to assess and reduce additional releases, and certify that it's properly storing hazardous waste. Undertake projects under a multi-year government-supervised $90 million mitigation program. Pursuant to EPA policy, Chemours was assessed $22.5 million in civil penalty based on ability to pay. This amount was sent out to the EPA DOJ reviewed Chemours' financial records. The settlement allows Chemours to continue manufacturing PFAS for critical commercial and military applications, including those where substitutes are not readily available, while preventing future contamination and protecting communities from that contamination. And it goes on and on and on here. And it goes into the history of this. But anyway, and again, of course, we got to promote the Make America Healthy campaign, right? Now, the next two stories, and we'll talk about these. No, that was Maine EPA story, and there's also Supreme Court decision, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. There's nobody that knows exactly what the hell is going to happen here with the Supreme Court here, with the decision on Roundup. I'm sorry. Allergies are killing me here. Alarming new trend. Dominating youth sports. Repeating 8th grade. Family pays thousands for it. Here we have another story. That's from NJ.com. 80%, and this is from the Telegraph, thetelegraph.co.uk. Story by Charles Hymas. 80% of Australian children escape social media ban. Limited proof found of regulations having substantial effects on online access for under 16-year-olds. 8 and 10 Australian children are still using social media despite their government's ban on access under 16-year-olds, research has revealed. The study by University of Newcastle in Australia suggests that there was insufficient evidence to show any substantive effects on children's use of social media more than 6 months after the ban was introduced in December. Australian ministers have blamed social media platforms for systemic breaches of the ban after the tech companies failed to remove or block children from their sites. Tougher rules are required. Right? And it goes on here and here on this, on what they could do, and no, people are finding their ways around it. Now you're going to say, what the hell does that have to do with our next story from New Jersey again? And what does that have to do with safety? And the answer is a hell of a lot. Here we have alarming new trend dominating youth sports. Repeating 8th grade, families pay thousands for it. A search for for-profit reclass academies are raising equity and oversight concerns across New Jersey's scholastic sports. So they talk about baseball here, but it's not only baseball here, it's also other sports. So what's going on here? Do we need, so they have an owner here. Right, and parents view the $16,500 tuition to these academies. They're unaccredited, by the way, for-profit program, a factory turn. Right, one of them is a factory turn gym. Here, so basically, you send your child here, and the goal is sports performance, less on academics. You're able to classify them as homeschooling. And you're saying, well, you know what? My child is not ready for high school, so we're going to have him or her, mostly boys, repeat 8th grade. This way, when they go into 9th grade, they have one more year on everybody. It's similar to two things that we are pretty familiar with in the sports world and academic world. One of them being, in this academic world, where you have a child who is right on the border of maybe the age for kindergarten, right? If you have kindergarten, and you say, you know what? My child is not mature enough for kindergarten. Look, he's acting, look, he's not mature enough. I don't feel comfortable. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold him back a year, and he'll start kindergarten next year. And then what happens? The child comes in, and from then on out, all the sports and everything else, academics, now kids are a little bit smarter, right? In first grade, they're a little bit more adept And no, that was, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying this is what happens. And that's understandable because there are some children, I have 2 kids of my own, and some of their classmates did that. And it was like a good decision where the parents had the kids go into kindergarten and then repeat kindergarten again because the kid just didn't have the maturity for that. Then it goes into on the college end, where you have people taking a gap year, depending on what sports there are. And for that year, they work, but they work, do something else, but they also do sports. Well, they train, maybe play for a minor league sports team, something like that, right? Minor league baseball. Maybe a collegiate level team. So they develop again and again and again. Now, when they go to college, or maybe they get on a team when they go to college. Now they're more likely to get a scholarship. They're a year ahead of everybody with training, right? Now you're able to compete at a much higher level. And what are we talking about? There's money involved, or always money involved. Now what they're doing is, in New Jersey, which allows this, 8th grade, you repeat 8th grade, delay your entry into high school. Now you had 1 more year of training. Maybe there's a maturity issue that, hey, my kid's too immature to be in high school. Maybe that's it. Or maybe they say, well, look, we want 1 more year for the child to work academically. So when they go into high school, maybe they didn't do that good in middle school or elementary school. And this is what's being used to justify this, to get people into competing at a higher academic level and also a higher sports level. So now there's a payoff, God willing, down the line. This is what's going on. Now, what does this have to do with safety? Here we have 2 systems. You have one for baseball, youth baseball, school baseball, and you have the other one for the social media ban in Australia for presumably the same demographic, teenagers. What does that have to do with safety? This is what happens. If you're a safety professional, this should not be a surprise. What it is how many organizations are run this way? We're going to institute a new safety program. You don't have the workers' input, or you may have workers' input in it. And then what happens? Rules get circumvented. You have drift in the system. You have normalization of deviance. You have all this stuff to go around the rules. Well, that happens. Now, what made them think when they wrote these laws? They didn't think. Most of these people are attorneys in New Jersey. They didn't think. Now, when they wrote these laws, the people weren't going to abuse them, take advantage of them, or otherwise, use them to their kids' advantage somehow. What made you think that wasn't going to happen? It happens in the workplace. It happens in society on all levels where things get taken advantage of. Why wouldn't this be another one? Why are we surprised that people aren't going to take care of parents? Some of these, no, and how many of these kids actually have the athletic aptitude to play whatever sport they're playing? They may not. Oh, yeah. You know what? If you work with us, right, we're in the ninth grade, 10th grade, you work with us, or 8th grade, you work with us, guess what? You might get a scholarship. You might be in the minor leagues. And by the way, what I am learning about the minor leagues, I did some research and talking around and everything else. Minor league baseball, they get a huge bonus, some of those guys, for signing. We're talking 6 figures, 7 figures. So, and it doesn't work out for a lot of them. Remember, how many major league ball players are there? I forget the exact number. Let me throw it into AI, right? MLB players are there playing right? How many MLB players are there playing? I think it's not a lot. So we're looking at 780 roughly. Now let's put in how many minor league affiliates players are there. So let's see minor leagues. So what you're looking at is somewhere around, in the minor leagues, there are roughly 116 teams and 30 people on a team. So you're looking at 3,480 active players. So you're talking about very, very few things, and your child is going for them. I don't know. We're going to be back here in a couple of minutes after commercial break and everything else. So that's what we got going on.
Safety Wars is streaming now.
SafetyFM.com.
And, of course, this one.
From the front lines of the safety war, it's Safety Wars, with your host, Jim Posel on Safety FM. Get ready to face the harsh reality.
We have been facing the harsh reality again and again and again. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so we have a special report here that we're going to talk about. So the case, in case you were not watching the news today, we had a Monsanto Supreme Court case came out. Monsanto versus Darnell, when EPA beats the jury. Welcome to Safety Wars with Lam Reads Reality. I wrote this out here, right? Today we're talking about one of the biggest Supreme Court decisions affecting liability in years. Monsanto Company versus Darnell decided today by the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, before anyone starts yelling in the comments here, sometimes they do, writing me emails, let's make something clear. I'm not an attorney. I'm just a guy on the radio, number one. The case is not about whether glyphosate causes cancer. That's the issue everyone wants to argue. And that's what a lot of the headlines were out there. It's not about, what the issue wants to argue. It's not the issue that the Supreme Court decided. The court decided something much more fundamental. And I have a feeling it's going to have widespread implications eventually. Who gets the final say over product warning labels? The federal government or 50 different state juries? John Darnell, the plaintiff, sued Monsanto, Missouri after allegedly using Roundup for roughly 20 years and later developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. His claim was straightforward. Monsanto should have warned consumers that Roundup could cause cancer. A Missouri jury agreed and awarded him more than $1 million, for the Supreme Court reversed the verdict. Why? Because a federal law with a very long name, one of the original ones on environmental stuff, Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, also known as FIFRA. Under FIFRA, pesticide labels must be approved by the EPA. Once the EPA approves the label, manufacturers generally must use that label unless the EPA authorizes a change. The law also says states cannot impose labeling requirements that are in addition to or different from federal requirements. The Supreme Court concluded that Darnell's lawsuit would effectively force Monsanto to place a cancer warning on the label, something EPA has repeatedly declined to require. In other words, Missouri wasn't just awarding damages, it was effectively rewriting a federally approved label. The court said federal law does not allow that. Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote the majority opinion, joined by Chief Justice Roberts, Justices Thomas Alito, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Barrett. So that was six. Six. Justice Thomas wrote a separate opinion, right? Justice Kachania Brown Jackson dissented, joined by Justice Neil Gorsuch. That's an interesting lineup on things. This was not the usual predictable ideological split on these high-end cases. It was a disagreement about federalism and congressional intent. Justice Jackson argued that Congress never intended EPA approval to become blanket immunity from state failure to warrant lawsuits. In her view, FIFRA establishes national minimum standards, but still allows injured people to argue that manufacturers should have provided stronger warnings. She pointed to language saying the EPA registration is not itself a legal defense, and argued Congress expected state tort law and federal regulation to coexist. She also warned that specific scientific understanding changes. Government agencies change their conclusions. And I'll add to this, they do it all the time, right, with this. And juries have traditionally played an important role in deciding whether a company acted reasonably based on all the evidence available. The majority simply disagreed. They said that this particular lawsuit would require a warning different from the one EPA approved, and Congress expressly prohibited states from doing exactly that. Now, here's where this becomes interesting for safety professionals. We're constantly told regulatory compliance is merely the minimum standard, and in many situations, that's absolutely true. OSHA compliance doesn't automatically shield an employer from civil liability. Building code compliance doesn't automatically prevent negligence claims. Meeting an ANSI standard doesn't guarantee a victory in court. But this case shows that there are exceptions. Sometimes Congress creates a regulatory system so comprehensive that compliance with a federal requirement becomes the controlling legal standard. That's exactly what happened here. The Supreme Court essentially said that when Congress places labeling authority in EPA's hands, states can't use jury verdicts to rewrite those labels. And this brings us to where I think this is going to eventually go, California. Many people, including me, asked whether this decision kills Proposition 65 warning requirements. The answer is not exactly, and probably not yet. California's Proposition 65 issues is actually separate. California lists glyphosate, a chemical known to cause cancer, after the International Agency of Research on Cancer classified it as probably carcinogenic. EPA reached the opposite conclusion, repeatedly stating that glyphosate is not likely to cause cancer in humans. Because of that scientific disagreement, federal courts had already blocked California from forcing glyphosate cancer warnings under Proposition 65, concluding that compelling companies to make a statement likely violated the First Amendment. So, Proposition 65 was facing serious legal issues way before this. What this case adds, the Darnell, is another weapon for manufacturers. Now they can argue that if EPA specifically rejected a cancer warning, states shouldn't be able to accomplish the same thing indirectly through lawsuits, or perhaps through state warning statutes. The Supreme Court didn't directly answer Proposition 65 question, but it certainly gave the manufacturers another powerful argument to use in future litigation. I suspect this opinion won't stop with pesticides. Expect lawyers to cite this case in disputes involving FDA-regulated drugs, medical devices, consumer products, motor vehicle warnings, and other federally regulated products whenever plaintiffs argue that additional warnings should have been provided. Whether those arguments succeed will depend on the language of each federal statute, but Darnell will almost certainly become one of the leading federal preemption cases going forward. Now, let's make this is Safety Wars, so we have observations. For years, we've heard one phrase over and over again from all over. Just let the juries decide. The Supreme Court's answer this week was, not if Congress already did. Or maybe put another way, you can't sue, and this was almost directly out of the dissenting opinion. Out of the majority opinion, you can't sue your way into rewriting an EPA-approved label simply because 12 people in Missouri disagree with the federal government's labeling decision. love that outcome or hate it, it's not really the point. This was not a referendum on glyphosate. It wasn't even about Monsanto. It was about federal preemption. Who writes the rules? Who administers the rules? EPA. Right? Who writes the rules? Congress. Who administers those rules? EPA. And once Congress has occupied the field, state juries may have far less authority than many people assume. For safety professionals, lawyers, manufacturers, and regulators, that's a real lesson from Monsanto versus Darnell. The case highlights a tension that safety professionals see every day. For decades, comply. Again, we're going to say this. Comply with the regulation, and then in civil court, compliance is the only minimum compliance is only the minimum standard. That's a daily fight that we have to fight every day for understanding with this stuff. Because how many times do people comply with the OSHA standard and they still get hurt because of human error and everything else, and then you end up with a lawsuit or usually get settled out of court? And that's all I have for tonight. For Safety Wars, this is Jim Posel, and I will, God willing, see you tomorrow on a Friday night. That's usually when we cover strictly politics, and there's a whole bunch of freaking politics to talk about tomorrow. So for Safety Wars, this is Jim Posel. I will catch you, like I said, God willing, tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.
Every day on the job, there's a moment. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't, where everything hangs in the balance. A loose bolt, a missed clip, a bad assumption. Or maybe the opposite, a choice made right. The right PPE, the right lockout, the right conversation at just the right time. Some folks call that luck. Here on Safety Wars, we call it something else. The kiss of safety. That quiet moment where a safe choice gives you another sunrise, another paycheck, another night with the people you love. And the truth? No policy, no regulation, no binder full of procedures means a thing. Unless you live it. Unless your team lives it. Unless safety isn't a chore, it's a culture. A war we fight every day, one small decision at a time. So today, we're talking about that kiss, the one you don't want to miss. The moment safety saves your life before you even knew it needed to. Let's break down the stories, the lessons, and the hard-won wins that make the difference. This is Safety Wars, and the war's still on.
Steel-toe boots by the job site gate, clipboard heavy with the weight of fate. Just sign it, don't slow us down. Don't make waves, don't shut it down. But I've seen the blood on the ground, I've read the names on the reports when they were passed around. A hard hat crack tells the truth, no lie. Somebody rushed, somebody waved it by. They call us overhead, call us a cost, but they never count what a life would have cost. Safety professionals, get off your knees. We weren't hired to beg, we were hired to lead. No more rubber stamps, no silent pleas. This job was built on accountability. Stand up straight, say what you see. Safety professionals, get off your knees. Morning brief in a half-lit shack with a rolling in, no turning back. Foreman says we'll figure it out. I say that plan's got holes, no doubt. I don't answer to shortcuts or production lies. I answer to families and closed casket cries. From OSHA regulations to hard-earned scars, the same paperwork, it's who we are. We don't work for comfort, we work for the truth, and the truth don't bend for a deadline due. Well, safety professionals, get off your knees. We weren't hired to beg, we were hired to lead. No more rubber stamps, no silent pleas. This job was built on accountability. Stand up straight, say what you see. Safety professionals, get off your knees. This ain't anti-work, this ain't anti-crew. Was pro everybody going home like they're supposed to do. I've walked the sides, I've run the calls, I've heard a quiet after the sirens fall. So if they say you're being difficult, I'll wear that badge like a hard-won belt. From the trailer park to the boardroom seat, same message echoes down every street. Compliance without courage is just theater play, but leadership means standing in the way. So cue the mic, turn the volume high. This is Safety Wars, no alibis. Safety professionals, get off your knees. We weren't hired to beg, we were hired to lead. No more rubber stamps, no silent pleas. This job was built on accountability. Stand up straight, say what you see. Safety professionals, get off your knees. Yeah, this ain't a favor, this ain't a fight. It's a line in the sand for doing it right. So boots on the ground, eyes open wide. Safety Wars, stand up, don't slide.